Welcome, everyone. My special guest today is Theresa Heredia, the winemaker at Gary Farrell Winery in Healdburg. And you look like very casual today, Theresa. Must be beautiful out there.
It is, yes. It's supposed to be 96 today.
96?
I think it's already 87.
Wow. And I'm assuming the humidity is not too bad, right?
No, it's pretty dry.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here in Chicago, and it's 90 today, but it's not the July or August humidity yet, so it's pretty comfortable. So
good. Sounds beautiful.
Everything is great. So on that note, how has 2020 proceeded in the vineyards?
It's looking pretty good. And when I say good, I mean smaller crop size than the last two vintages, which were really, really big. And so that's a good thing. It's going to be a little bit closer to average size crop overall for Pinot and Chardonnay. But we did get hit pretty hard in some of our Chardonnay vineyards. So we may come in a little bit light on the Chardonnay front. But again, given the circumstances after two big harvests in a row and the other circumstances happening right now with the coronavirus, I think it's good that we're coming in a little bit lighter this year.
Yeah.
But it's looking good. It's early to tell. Fruit set has taken place, and we can see where the damage has really taken place in terms of frost. But everywhere else, mostly with Pinot Noir, the crop looks pretty good, pretty close to average in size.
Are the frosts random, or is there one or two particular vineyards that it always seems to hit?
Never the same ones,
okay.
It seems. But there were two Chardonnay vineyards that were hit pretty badly this year. And they're, it's okay though. We get enough fruit from those vineyards. So it's not a big issue. It's not any of our, iconic vineyards. It's none of the ones that we're tasting today, actually.
Okay.
Which is a good thing.
And when you say you lost some fruit, I mean, it wasn't much. It was like 10, 20%, something like that, or?
Well, one of them actually, the grower thinks it's, we may only get 2 or 3 of the 10 tons that we originally estimated.
Okay.
And he's being conservative. He's trying to give us a heads up early on so that we have the opportunity to, look for other sources if we need to. But sure. We're looking okay otherwise.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what I want to concentrate on today is your work in Russian River Valley. And I've been in the business for a long time, and every 10 years or so, there seems to be a new kind of catchphrase. And for a while, it was that mouthfeel, and there have been some other ones. And of course, lately, everyone wants to talk about terroir. And visiting France and Italy, as I do quite often, terroir, the whole notion was born in Burgundy, especially with Pinot Noir, and as Chardonnay as well in the Côte d'Or. But when I'm up in Piemonte and we taste Barolo, that really is a great classic example of terroir as well. But I think that it's a catchphrase, it's a soundbite, it's kind of overused. And I think if you overuse it, I'm sorry, do you want to say something? Or?
Oh, no, I was agreeing.
Okay. And if you use that too much, it kind of loses its meaning. I think it's only for a few varieties and only in a few spots. And that's a long way of saying that if I had to name one area in California that I thought was so distinctive in its terroir and in its wines, and that would be Russian River Valley. So
I like to hear that.
Well, there's some other places too in Santa Barbara, Santa Maria Valley, places like that, but
right.
Parts of Monterey. But I really want to talk about that today. I know you make wines from Santa Barbara and you make wines from other parts of Sonoma, but Russian River Valley is really your focus, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And tell us, first of all, just generally, why about Russian River, about the climate, the soils, about temperature, about just, what makes it so ideal for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay?
So what really makes the Russian River Valley special is that we get kind of the best of both worlds. We get, warm, sunny days because we are in California, but we're in Northern California, and we're, close enough to the Pacific Ocean that we have the marine influence as well. And the most important thing is that we're called the Russian River Valley. So many of our vineyards, like Rocchioli and Bacigalupi, just for example, are sitting very close to the river. And so the river acts as a conveyor belt, pulling the fog through from the Pacific Ocean through the Russian River Valley and bathing the grapes in fog, cooling them down at night and keeping them cool in the morning. And then we get the sunshine during the day, which makes our wines very different from those of Santa Maria, for example, Central Coast, California. It's a little more difficult to explain the differences with Santa Barbara versus Russian River Valley in terms of fruit intensity. But what I'm getting at is that because we have that intense sunshine during the daytime hours, the fruit, both the Chardonnay and the Pinot, develop this really rich, succulent, juicy fruit characteristic, which is very quintessential Russian River Valley. But the beautiful thing about our wines is that because we're cool at night, because the fog comes in the afternoon, sometimes stays until, depending on the region of the Russian River Valley, sometimes the fog stays until or we get sunshine until the afternoon, but the fog comes back in the afternoon, say 4 p.m., 5 p.m. And so it really helps the vines to retain abundant natural acidity, really bright, vibrant acidity. And that's what we like to capture. We want to capture a sense of place from each of the vineyards, but we're in California, we want that richness and that intensity, but
right.
We also want the acidity making our wines food friendly. So instead of terroir, we don't really, in English, we don't have an equivalent word. So I use site specificity. We like to use that term.
Okay. I like
which I joke is a coronavirus hazard. It's a COVID hazard because when you say site specificity, you spit everywhere.
I will credit you when I use that in
yeah, thanks.
So, I'm going to put up a map of your vineyards in Russian River Valley, and let's go over
Perfect.
that. I can find here I am. Just a second here. Okay, I have to just pop something up here 1 second.
Okay, no worries. I have it up here too if you're unable to do it.
Okay.
Technical challenges. We all have to become Zoom pros with what we're doing right now, huh?
Well, I've been doing this for 3 months, and I'm still learning. But
that's the thing with Zoom. It still happens.
Let's try it now.
Okay.
Okay, there we are. Okay, here is a map of Russian River Valley and your vineyards. So,
excellent, perfect.
First of all, before we go into the specifics, I know that I visited when Gary was still the winemaker, and I have not had a chance to visit since. But
okay.
Maybe because Gary and I were both political science majors, and what do you do
cool.
with a political science major but go into wine, right? But maybe we had that kindred soul. But I love this wines right from the start, and I know you use fruit from the Rochioli Allen vineyards, which was his first wines. How do you develop relationships with these growers? I mean, I'm sure that success breeds success, but are you looking at a particular farming style, philosophy of organic, sustainable viticulture, or is it just something that happens over the course of years and you get introduced to someone? Tell us about that.
I think it's more the latter. I think that sometimes we're introduced to vineyards. Sometimes they reach out to us. Sometimes we have amazing vineyard opportunities and they reach out to us, like Fort Ross, for example, which we started producing in 2014. The owners reached out to us asking if we'd be interested. So a lot of producers know that we purchase fruit, we source fruit from all these amazing vineyards, and so they often reach out to us to see if we're interested. On the flip side,
I'm sorry, does the winery own any vineyards or not?
We do not own any vineyards. That's one of the special, unique characteristics of Gary Farrell Winery is that we have the opportunity to cherry pick and source from the best vineyards from all over the Russian River Valley, Sonoma County, some outside of the area as well. So I like to talk about us sort of on par with a high-end, either Premier Cru or Grand Cru negociant from Burgundy. They source from different areas like Bruno Claire or Nicolas Potel, somebody like that.
Okay.
So, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're buying grapes from all these different vineyards. And so on the flip side, sometimes what we do is we're always on, the lookout for great vineyards, iconic vineyards, like Gap's Crown. We started working with that in 2013. I was talking about Fort Ross. Martaella, which we're going to taste today, is another vineyard that we started sourcing in 2013. We just knew that it had, a good following and potential for some really great wines.
Let's talk specifically about, we talk about classic vineyards. I'll put up another photo here, and we'll go back to that map in a second. But as far as classic vineyards, it doesn't get much more classic than this, and that's the Rochioli vineyard, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Gorgeous vineyard.
Tell us about that, because I understand that you're maybe the only one or one of the only two wineries that get the Pinot Noir fruit from here.
Oh, I don't know how many actually buy today, but definitely, we're the longest relationship that Rochioli has had with producers. So we have had a relationship. We, Gary Farrell Winery, have had a relationship with Rochioli since the inception of the brand, and also Gary's relationship with Rochioli predates the Rochioli brand as well.
Oh, really?
So Gary was I don't have to give his history now because you've already explained that he studied political science. He didn't know he was going to get into the wine business, but we always like to tell the story about how he got into fermentation science while in college and, made beer in his dorm room. And that sort of set the spark in him. And then he started making wine. So he was actually working at Davis Bynum. That was like a collegiate, a place where a lot of winemakers made their wine, small batches and stuff. And he became he was offered an opportunity to make the wines for Rochioli, but he was paid in grapes. And so he ended up making 55 cases of Pinot Noir from the Rochioli Allen Vineyard in 1982. And that was his first label. That was the first Gary Farrell Pinot Noir. A whopping 55 cases. Wow. So we've been getting grapes from the Rochioli and Rochioli Allen Vineyard since then. And it's been a handshake agreement. We don't have a physical grape contract. We have a listing that we sign off each year that basically lists estimates of what we're going to get, but it's not a grape contract. It's a handshake agreement. And we've had that since the beginning.
That's a nice story to hear. So I see the river there. Tell me about the orientation here. What direction are we looking at in this photo?
It's hard to tell. Well, I guess we're looking east. Wow, I can't tell actually. I don't know what the orientation of this photo is.
That's all right.
But you can see the river. You can see the vineyards are just adjacent to it. And our river block Pinot that goes into our Rochioli Pinot literally sits right next to the river. And so does the Rochioli Allen Chardonnay, which we're going to taste, which we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
So those both, the Rochioli River Block Pinot and the Rochioli Allen Chardonnay are on that side, on the river side of West Side Road. I'm not going to talk east and west because it's West Side Road and it gets confusing talking about both for people.
Right.
But they're heavily influenced by the river climate, by the fog, being pulled through along the river and bathing the grapes in the fog, as I was talking about. And then our Rochioli Allen Pinot Noir is on the other side of West Side Road, so opposite the river. And so it's a little bit further away. It's on a little bit of it has a little bit more elevation, a little bit more hills. In fact, the block that we get fruit from is called the Old North Hills. Okay. And they're older vines planted in the 70s, some of them, and so they are low yielding, really great concentration, but really nice savory characteristics compared to the Rochioli Pinot Noir that's right there next to the river. Similar clonal material, similar, age of the vines. Actually, Allen is older, but they're both older vines. And so it's just interesting how different the Rochioli Pinot is from the Allen Pinot.
How old are the oldest vines in the Rochioli vineyard?
The river block Pinot that we get is, I think it was planted in 1989.
Okay. So a little over 30 years. Okay.
Yeah. So a little older, not as old as the stuff on the other side.
All right. Well, we've got a lot of vineyards to talk about today. Let's go back to that map. And you were nice enough to send me a few wines. So let's start off with the Bacigalupi vineyard. That's been around a long time as well, right? So tell us where that is on this map and talk about the Bacigalupi. We don't have the picture of it, but look on the map.
Great. Yeah. So Bacigalupi is the northernmost Chardonnay vineyard that we have that you can see on the map. And it is in the warmest part of the Russian River Valley. So it runs along the river, but it's not immediately adjacent to the river like Rochioli is. It's a little bit, closer to the road and a little bit further away from the river. In fact, the Chardonnay vineyard is on the other side of the road as well. It's by the Bacigalupi property. Some of the Chardonnay that we get for this particular blend is from the old block. Do you want to talk to people about the 1976 Paris tasting while we're talking about Bacigalupi?
Well, from what I understand, that was the vineyard that was used by Chateau Montelena, correct?
It is. It's one of, and it was. I believe it was 40% of the blend.
Really, That's great.
Yeah. So it really, the Paris tasting is really what made California wines famous. It made the Napa Valley famous. Nobody really talked about that 40% of the blend was from Sonoma, from
Right.
Bacigalupi.
Right.
But it was, and if you go to the Bacigalupi tasting room, I believe they have the information, kind of the history of it there in their tasting room. So some of that fruit is actually in this blend. They're older vines planted in the 60s, so very low yielding. In fact, most of that original block is being replanted because it just wasn't really producing much fruit anymore. But up to this point, some of that fruit was in this.
Okay, I'm sorry. Were they using the old like Wente clone and things like that? It's
all old Wente. Good question. Okay. Thanks for calling me out on that.
Right.
It's all old Wente. All the Chardonnay that we get from Bacigalupi is old Wente, and it's a clone, a selection, depending on your source of the fruit. It's very famous in California. It grows really well in California. I've heard it doesn't do so well in Oregon, but I don't have any personal experience as a winemaker.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with the assumption that in Oregon, they don't get enough sun intensity to make old Wente what it is in California.
I got you. Okay.
So I'm gonna go with the assumption that that's what the difference is. Maybe it doesn't ripen enough in Oregon, or maybe it doesn't get the richness and the intensity that we're looking for in our Chardonnays. And the Bacigalupi Chardonnay is a perfect example. It has that richness, that opulence. It still has a really beautiful acid backbone to it, but it differs from the other two Chardonnays that we're going to talk about today in that those other two have a little bit more apple and pear citrus notes. The Olive at Lane in particular has a lot of citrus. Mm-hmm. The Bacigalupi, on the other hand, tips a little bit more towards it includes some stone fruit characteristics like apricot that adds the richness and the depth to the palate. So I was talking about what makes the Russian River Valley special. And since we have the Bacigalupi, I'd like to hear what you have to say as well. But it's a great example because you really get that rich, succulent fruit, and you get that crisp, vibrant, bright acidity in the backbone of the wine as well.
I would agree with that. I got some notes. This is the 2017 vintage we're talking about.
Yep.
And that's the current release, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. I did get some pear. I also got some notes of lemon custard and a little bit of honey as well. Mm-hmm. Wine had wonderful complexity, which I find in all of your Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. So that's a constant, but and lovely balanced. And I also mentioned in my notes that it had, as big and as rich as it was, it had a good deal of restraint, which mm-hmm. is what I like. I get tired of too many, wherever they're from, whether it's Russian River or anywhere in California or France or anywhere, Chardonnays that just, kind of announce themselves. Your wines don't, and I really appreciated that. So.
Thanks. And I should address the 17 vintage just a little bit since we have a lineup of all 17s. A lot of people probably know, or maybe not yet, maybe as the 17s are starting to get released, people will start talking about the 17 vintage, but it was really hot. It was an anomaly. It was, one of the most challenging vintages I've had since I started working at Gary Farrell, because it got up to about 113, I forget if the peak was 113 or 117. Oh. But from August 20, what's that?
This is even in Russian River Valley?
Yes.
Wow.
It doesn't get that hot here. So we started on August 21st, which was the day of the eclipse. And we could not see anything because, as you know, we're in the Russian River Valley and it's foggy. So it was cloudy, foggy. We couldn't see any eclipse at all. But that first week, it was nice and cool, perfect temperature. So we picked about 5-6% of our grapes during August 21st to August 27th.
Okay.
Or 28th. And then around August 28th is when the heat wave came. It was supposed to be in the mid 90s. It wasn't supposed to be 113 degrees. Yeah. And so we were planning ahead, and I started calling and scheduling picks knowing it was going to be mid 90s, right? I didn't know it was going to be 113. So I pre-scheduled a lot of picks, mm-hmm. Assuming that it was going to be, pretty hot. Right. And I'm really glad that I did, because anything that was on the brink, close to being ripe, I went ahead and scheduled it, just kind of forecasting when it might be ready based on the heat wave.
Sure.
And thank God I did that, because in a hot year, growers get booked up really, really quickly. And then if you're not on the schedule, you're not going to get your grapes when you want them. So we got everything right on, with beautiful, vibrant, really lifted fruit aromas and really beautiful acidity, which you don't expect from a vintage like 2017 when it was so hot. And I think I'm starting to hear more winemakers talk about having a similar experience. one important thing, I don't know if if you ever like to talk about the biodynamic calendar, but I went back to look at, you do?
Please, yeah.
So I went back to look at the dates, August 28th through, up till about September 10th. And we had a lot of fruit and flower days during that period of time, a lot of fruit and flower days, which means that the gravitational forces are not as strong. And in theory, you're going to have more of the flavors and aromas in the fruit zone of the plant, of the grapevine. And so when you pick the grapes, you're capturing all of that. And so I think that I believe in the gravitational forces of the biodynamic theories. There's a lot of crazy stuff in it, a lot of woo-woo stuff, but I believe in gravitational forces. So it's a really great observation, and I think the wines show it.
Great. Now, you mentioned August 21st to 27th in that year was harvest at Bachkalupi, but what if there's such a thing as a typical year anymore? When would a normal harvest be of those grapes?
Bachkalupi comes in early. It's generally one of our first picks. The Pinot Noir is generally one of our first vineyards to pick, and it usually comes in at the end of August. The Chardonnay tends to come in between the last days of August and the first few days of September.
Okay, so it's a little bit early. So
just a little.
And we can move on to the next vineyard unless you want to talk a little bit more about Bachkalupi, or
no.
Move on to Olivet Lane.
Mm-hmm. So if you could drag the map up a little bit so we can see the center of the map a little bit. I don't know if that's possible.
I don't know. You're asking advanced math.
That's okay. That's okay.
Let me try and do it. Let me see.
Okay. I'm going to talk about it while you try to do that. So in the center, kind of the eastern middle section of the Russian River Valley, if we can all visualize it now, we have this neighborhood that's called the Santa Rosa Plain. The Santa Rosa Plain is a flat region. It's very close to my house where I am right now. And it's really nice and sunny during the day. And it gets even colder at night because it's a flat area and cold air settles. So it's a frost-prone region. But then during the growing season, it's really great because it helps the vines to really just hold on to that acidity. And so when I pick the grapes at a relatively low sugar, I like to pick Olivet Lane at about 22 brix, which is low compared to other producers. And I think that we get the opulence and the richness of fruit that we want, but we also get that really vibrant natural acidity. Okay, there you go. There you go. So that way we can see just below and to the left of the Russian River Valley marker there, you can see Olivet Lane, Pellegrini, just below the Taboni vineyard.
Right near Forestville. Okay, yes.
Yeah, in fact, when we get to the Marta Elapino, we can keep the map just like this because we'll talk about that one as well.
Okay. Well, yeah, I won't. So are the elevations on these vineyards pretty similar?
No, I mean, all of it, the ones in the Santa Rosa Plain, yes, they're all in that kind of flat region. And, we don't have vineyards that are in a mountainous area here, a hilly area in the Russian River Valley. So when we talk about elevation at, say, the Rocchioli Allen Vineyard, we're only talking about a few hundred feet at most.
Right.
Yeah. So, so back to Olivet Lane. So we really get this beautiful citrus, I would say Meyer lemon, and also apple and pear. But a little bit of honeysuckle, you get sort of the floral aromas as well, but it's really a citrus-driven wine. It's a very mineral-driven wine. And that's what I love about it. Part of what gives it that minerality is just the beautiful acidity from those cold temperatures at night because the cold air settles. And this is also Old Wente Chardonnay.
Okay.
Planted in 1975.
All right.
And our oak regime is mostly light toast. I'm using all French oak barrels from different forests. We like French oak with our wines because it's tighter grain, and tighter grain is more complementary with the style of wines that we're producing. We're looking to capture site specificity from each vineyard, and tighter grain, lighter toast really helps to accentuate and kind of add a framework to the wine without giving it, oak that masks everything else. Right. That we're looking for.
What's the percentage of new oak for these wines?
On the single vineyards, it's about 35% new French oak.
For both Chardonnay and Pinot Noir?
For Chardonnay is about 35% on the single vineyards. Pinots are about 40%.
Okay. What about, I know there's people watching from your distributor or the national importer with Vinces, so they have the straight Russian River selections, the Chardonnay Pinot Noir. What about new oak on those wines?
So the Russian River Selection Chardonnay is about 30% new French oak, and the Russian River Selection Pinot Noir is 40% as well. Okay. And our distributor also has our Olivet Lane Chardonnay, so they do get that vineyard designate as well.
Okay. Well, your notes on that are very similar to mine. I mean, I had red apples and orange zest and lemon peel, and I just thought that even more than the Bacigalupi just had such beautiful varietal purity.
Yeah, agreed.
Lovely wine and a long, long finish and very pleasing finish. So that was really just, Bacigalupi maybe a little more distinctive, especially with the Wente clone. But you said it's the same clone. But I just found this to be, basically the quality was pretty much the same, and the appeal was the same, but just a little bit different style in terms of its length and real high tone fruit. So.
And I do tend to pick the Bacigalupi Chardonnay just a hair riper than the Olivet Lane. The Olivet Lane tends to be ready at about 22 bricks, between 22 and 23 bricks, somewhere in there. Whereas the Bacigalupi Chardonnay has more intensity, maybe between 22.5 and 23.5 bricks. So that, equates to between 13.5 and 14.1% alcohol, roughly. Olivet Lane tends to be 13.5 to 13.8% alcohol.
All right, let's move on to the Rocchioli Allen vineyards, which is a little bit north of where it comes in with Hop Kiln and Landmark there. So it's kind of in the northern Russian River. Go ahead and talk about those. We already saw.
So those vineyards, Bacigalupi, Rocchioli Allen, Hop Kiln, the vineyards that you see right there in that northernmost section, that is a neighborhood of the Russian River Valley called the Middle Reach. And they run along the river, hence the name. And they have characteristics of what I was talking about earlier with the Rocchioli being right next to the river. And so you get a different intensity. The wine from Rocchioli Allen should be similar in flavor profile to the Bacigalupi, but it's not at all. I would say our Rocchioli Chardonnay has more similar characteristics to Bacigalupi than the Rocchioli Allen.
Okay.
And they are different clones. We're not tasting and talking about the Rocchioli today, but our Rocchioli Chardonnay that comes predominantly from the river block is clone 5, similar to clone 4 and related to Old Wente.
4 and 5, these were developed in California, these clones?
So these are clones 4 and 5 are basically the cleaned up offspring of Old Wente.
Okay.
So Old Wente being, kind of hens and chicks. You really never know what you're going to get with Old Wente. It can be really small clusters, intense. Clones 4 and 5 they were originally cleaned up. The budwood was originally cleaned up and propagated to be disease-free.
Okay.
And so they're just 2 generations of those cleaned up clones. And so they do have clones 4 and 5 are similar, but I think clone 5 tends to be a little bit more narrow, compact clusters compared to clone 4, which can be bigger and juicier and slightly looser in shape, in morphology. So the Rocchioli Allen is clone 15. I can't give you any history about clone 15 because I'm actually not sure, but our Allen Chardonnay comes predominantly from block 1 at the Allen Vineyard, which is closer to the road. So further from the river, a little bit closer to West Side Road. Okay. And for some reason, it always has this really savory quality to it. I'd love to hear what your notes are before I continue talking about it.
What I noticed on this with the aromas, there was even a little bit of grapefruit in here, not real strong, but just lemon peel, grapefruit, golden poppies, maybe a little bit more noticeable oak, but that just added to sort of the appeal of it, the hedonistic pleasure of it, but not strong oak at all, but a little bit richer in the mid palate, beautiful varietal character, a little bit of yellow spice notes in the finish, great complexity, and just super elegant wine. That was just really, of the 3 Chardonnays I had, that was my favorite.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love the Rocchioli Allen Chardonnay as well. And yeah, it's always fascinating to me how it is in that warmer area of the Russian River Valley, but it always has that more savory. And when I say savory, my descriptions of the wine, my descriptors are not as much succulent fruit. It's more floral and spice and flinty,
Right.
Characteristics that are not fruit driven like Bacigalupi.
Okay. On these single vineyard Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs, what's the average production?
So the Olivet Lane, we made just shy of 600 cases. The Rochioli Allen is about 500 cases, and the Bacigalupi, I think we only made about 260 ballpark cases.
Oh. Well, I looking on your website, I see the prices, and considering the production is that tiny, the prices are very reasonable.
Yeah, we are very well known for having amazing, sometimes ridiculously affordable prices for the vineyard sources that we're getting, and we like to keep it that way. We like our wines to be, you know, really great and site specific with great names, but we want them to be accessible.
I appreciate that, and I know a lot of people do, and I think it's important that we have to keep bringing in new people to the you know, across all ages and all types of wines and everything. And they're not going to come in if everything is $75 and $85 a bottle.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think, just as I said before, like the Russian River line, just that Chardonnay is just, boy, it's about as perfect an introduction to Russian River Chardonnay as I've had. And
have you had the 17?
I've not. No. I think
okay.
The 16 I had, which was lovely, but not had the 17. Yeah,
the 16s are both lovely. If you can get your hands on them at shops locally there in Chicago, grab them up. But as soon as the 17s come out, I think you're going to love them. They are, I'm gonna just say this out loud because I've said it every other time I've talked about them. They are just stupid delicious. So, and I say that again because we're not cocky winemakers at Gary Farrell. I have a team. We're a team. We're not, conceited about our wines. We don't go out there flaunting and, talking about how great we are and how great our wines are. But I am so proud of the 17s and just thrilled about the quality of the 17s because of everything I described to you, that vintage. It was such a hot, challenging year.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at how beautiful they turned out. And that's why I say that the 17 Russian River selections are stupid delicious, because you are getting all these amazing vineyards that we're tasting today in those two blends. And they're incredible for the prices. They're suggested retail of $35 and $45 respectively.
Yeah, that's a new technical term for me, stupid delicious, but I love
stupid
it.
Delicious.
I use the term yummy, and people understand that when you start to talk about austerity in wines.
Yeah,
a lot of people look at you. It's like is this guy trying to show off with a 25-cent word here, But saying they're stupid delicious or yummy or just at zippy acidity, whatever it is. I mean, the more we can kind of make things a little bit easier to understand, I think the better. So
yeah, I just saw a comment from Lars talking about 2017. It does sound like it was similar, and yes, you're right. The temps were high during the day. I would say that it was a little bit different, that we didn't really have much of a cooling effect to help us recover. There was really no recovery period in 2017, so the temperatures in the evening were cooler than the daytime temperatures for sure, but it was still warmer at night than in any other vintage that I've worked so far. So it's amazing that we're still able to have so much acidity, but there definitely was moisture in the soil, which helped us a lot.
Yeah, I had done a few webinars the last month or so with Napa producers, especially with Cabernet. We're talking about an entirely different, bulk game here, but they were just talking about how hot it was, and I was afraid that, when I started tasting your wines, that the acidity wasn't going to be there, but they're there.
Yeah, in spades.
Yeah. All right. Talk about Pinot Noir, and we'll start with a vineyard. I sent you the notes on this. I was so excited about this wine the other day that I had to send you the notes. But it's a 2017, and correct my pronunciation, but from the Martella vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Some say Martella, and that's okay too.
Okay, well, that would be more the Spanish pronunciation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so
where
are we at here?
So we are very close to, right below the Russian River Valley is Parnell, and just below that is Martella.
Yeah. Benovia, okay.
So it's there in that flat area, very close to my home where I am right now, and very close to our Pellegrini Olivet Lane vineyard. So we've been purchasing grapes from Benovia since 2013, and we did our first vineyard designated Pinot Noir from there in 2013, and we've been making it since then. We now make a Chardonnay, starting with the 2018 vintage. We have a Chardonnay as well from a Montrachet clone, which is amazingly delicious.
Wow.
Yeah. So keep your eye out for that. It's really good. I think you'll like it. Based on what you've described so far, I think you'll really like it. So I was thrilled when I saw your email with your tasting notes and how excited you sounded about the 2017 Marcella Pinot Noir, because I had it a few, maybe 2.5, 3 weeks prior. And when I opened it, I tasted it and I thought, wow. I mean, yes, it's a young wine. It's 2017. It's probably too young to be drinking most of these. It's, too soon. But the wine had this core of beautiful, dark blueberry and blackberry, and some really savory, like black tea notes to it. And when I tasted it that first night, I thought immediately it reminded me of a wine from the Côte de Nuit in Burgundy. And I'll let you address your crowd about this. But I agree with you that it didn't have the structure. It didn't have the tannin backbone. It was just the fruit quality that reminded me of the Côte de Nuit.
Right.
But softness wise, on the palate, tannin wise, I think you're right. You're onto something with Pommard from the Côte de Blanc.
I had it immediately listed it as very Pommard-like. And what I guess reading about this on the website too, there's nine different clones you use in that vineyard, or planted in the vineyard.
The vineyard is planted to many different clones. This blend is composed of 2 or 3 different clones, small percentages, mostly Calera, which gives it that dark backbone. And then it has a little bit of clone 37, which is Mount Eden, and a tiny bit of Swan.
Okay. Well, I had 2 things. One, just my notes. At first I put down exquisite, which I don't often put, but that's a good thing. But I put down Bing cherry and a little bit of bacon fat, which usually, is very sexy and draws people to the wine, and a little hint of sweet brown spice. But I just absolutely loved it. Was beautifully structured, the mid palate, and it had a very elegant, refined tannins, very good acidity, just fantastic harmony, great persistence, and varietal purity. And one note on that, with all the Pinot Noirs I tried, sometimes I've had a note of cola, like in a lot of Russian River Pinots, and I don't find those in yours, which is great, because I think that can be a little touch of that is kind of nice, but it's just so strong and it's so one-dimensional. But I didn't find that in yours. So, and one of the things, you read my email and I read yours, and you said that you tried the wine 3 days later. I just poured it, and this is now the 3rd day open, and it's incredible shape. And I did not have it in the refrigerator; it's just been sitting out in my apartment. So, but
right. So, how is it today compared to yesterday and compared to the first day? Do you have the same experience I wrote you?
With the flavors, yeah. It's toned down a little bit, but not by much. I mean, it's pretty similar. It's held up very, very well. And this was, the Pinot Noirs I had, this was my highest rated. And maybe it was just because I'd never heard of the vineyard. I was just, you go in not expecting any, you don't know what to expect. Right. And you're just, so overwhelmed by everything in here. But it's just the complexity of this wine, just, as well as the balance, Yeah,
and that it keeps opening up. We had a comment from that goes along with what you're talking about. We had a comment from Anthony Henry.
Amazing.
And it's true that the acidity of this wine and all of the wines is really what helps to carry them. It supports everything that we're trying to capture. All that really fresh, vibrant fruit, the aromas and the flavors are sort of supported by the acidity, I think. That's my opinion. And because I picked earlier, I think you're not getting as much of the cola flavors. I feel like the cola is maybe something that expresses itself when the fruit's just a little bit riper.
Interesting. Okay. And I'm glad that you put down that note about you loved it after the 3rd day, because I would normally move on to a different wine. I would be like, well, maybe the next day. But
yeah.
So that gave me a chance to just kind of sit aside here. And I think people watching should realize that too, that you don't have to drink these, finish them right away. It's not a problem. It's not like, these are California wines. They don't age everything. No, they.
Yeah.
As Anthony says, it's hard to keep these for 3 days.
It is. It's just true, Anthony. It is.
Yeah.
But since I have several bottles of wine that I open for, tastings like this, sometimes I have to hold them for a few days. And so it gives me the opportunity to taste them over several days. Otherwise, I would be passed out every day.
Yeah, the problems of this job, right?
Yeah, exactly. First world problems, as we like to say. Exactly,
yeah. Well, let's talk about the Fort Ross Vineyard, and I found this to be very, very different. And now that's not in Russian River Valley. An AVA that was developed in the last 10 years, right? Fort Ross Seaview.
Fort Ross Seaview. Mm-hmm.
When was that AVA created?
Let's see. We started working with it in 2014. I don't remember, 15, 16,
Okay.
something like that. Yeah, maybe before, maybe 14.
I'll see about the map here. Actually, the map I have is just Russian River, so it's not on there. My mistake. So, but it's northwest of Russian River Valley, correct?
Correct. And Fort Ross really, the vineyard owners really pride themselves on this being the closest vineyard to the Pacific Ocean in California. And it is, as a crow flies, it's very close. I don't know how many, I don't know what the distance is exactly, but it's very close to the Pacific Ocean. But the difference is it's really up high. So it's about 1,100, maybe 1,200 feet elevation. So it sits above the fog layer. So the vineyard is bathed in the fog through late morning hours. But then because it's up at such a high elevation, it's exposed to sunshine for several hours during the day until the fog gets back up there again. And so similar to some of the wines from, say, well, I don't want to compare it to Russian River Valley. It has some of the richness and succulent fruit qualities that we get from fruit in the Russian River Valley, but the fruit qualities are more savory when you compare them to Russian River Valley wines. I would compare it more to the fruit qualities of, say, our Rochioli-Allen Pinot Noir. So it's very red fruit driven. It has some blue notes as well, maybe some blueberry, but I'd love to hear how you described the Fort Ross.
Well, we are on parallel wavelength here because I have, for the only Pinot Noir notes I have that list savory, this is the wine. I did mention the savory thing. I said it had aromas of wild raspberry, some red poppy, and then like an Indian spice like cumin.
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent character, good acidity, middleweight tannins, very well integrated wood notes. And I said there's a bit of a savory character to this. So if I had to pair this with foods, it would be it wouldn't be the typical, like I love duck breast, but it would be more like the Martella or the Rochioli-Allen, but this would be more toward Indian cuisine or maybe like roast pheasant, something like that.
Our estate sommelier said she likes to have it with pizza.
All right.
I didn't ask her what kind of pizza, but for some reason she likes to have it with pizza, which I think is really cool. I need to try that one of these days.
Yeah, I find pizza lovers like to try a lot of everything with pizza. So
right.
Go ahead.
Did you say poppy?
Red poppy in the aroma.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit? I love people's tasting notes.
Just these bright red flowers that I just that I found in the aromas. That floral character.
Yeah.
Along
beautiful.
With ice. So it was great complexity. So, but that savory character definitely drove the wine in a different direction. So
right. And that is a quality that's characteristic. It's unique to the Fort Ross vineyard because of where it's located, the elevation. We work with two different clones from Fort Ross. The predominant clone that goes into the blend is Calera. You heard me talk about Calera with the Martella blend. So there is a slightly similar theme there, but it's interesting to look at the two different climates, the two different locations, and compare qualities. So the other clone that we work with from Fort Ross is clone 777. And usually, in my experience as a winemaker, 777 tends to be really deep, dark, brooding, sometimes jammy if you're picking it riper. But I don't find this to be the case with the 777 from Fort Ross at all. It's leaner, it's lighter in color, lighter in tannin and everything. So it just explains the difference in climate. 7.7 there versus 7.7 elsewhere is very, very different.
Okay. Unless you want to add anything else, we'll move on to the Rochioli-Allen Pinot Noir 17.
We talked about Rochioli-Allen when we talked about the Chardonnay. So I was telling the group that the Pinot Noir vineyard is not on the side of the river. So it's on the other side of West Side Road. And it's a little bit more hilly, hence the name of the vineyard. Our blocks are called the Old North Hills. And so they're older vines. It's Pommard selection, and Pommard tends to be earthy. The clone of Pommard tends to be earthy, red fruit driven, and I would say that's exactly what the Rochioli-Allen Pinot Noir expresses. Also a lot of savory characteristics, more red fruited than the Fort Ross. And I would say maybe even more earthy and spicy than the Fort Ross as well.
Yes. I decided on this one. I just literally opened the bottle, so I was just waiting.
Great.
You know how where I had the other ones open for a day or two, but
Mm-hmm.
this is, to me, this has the greatest varietal purity. Maybe I shouldn't say it has the greatest, because the Martella is also, you know, on that line as well. But Bing cherry, maraschino cherry, a little bit of raspberry. There's a little bit of orange zest in there.
Mm-hmm.
Very fine texture and structure and backbone, and very rich tannins. But again, the tannins are very, very elegant and very, you know, much in balance. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't not stick out at all. And the wood notes are just perfectly integrated. So
I love to hear that.
yeah,
Light toast. It's all about the light toast selection and
yeah,
tight grain from France.
yeah.
We use barrels from Trancé and Allier predominantly, tight grain, and Jupi.
Okay. And again, very good acidity. And I can only imagine when you get to a cooler year, like maybe 18 or something, 19 would be, you know, even higher acidity. But I think this, of the three that I tried, has the longest aging potential.
Definitely. And part of that is the acidity. The other part is just those, the fine grained tannins in the Rocchioli Allen. Sometimes the tannins in certain vintages, like I remember the 2014 and 13 Rocchioli Allen vintages, the tannins were really dry and gave the wine this really austere, rustic characteristic. And it made them a little less approachable in their youth. But I think the 17, the tannins are not as dry or austere. So it's more approachable, but it has that backbone of tannin that really, the tannin and the acidity are going to help it to age tremendously. So let me know if you're able to keep that for the next day or two. Let me know what you think about it day later.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody have to come in and steal the wine from me not to keep it for the next 2 days. I will guard that with my life. I'll let you know on an email. So.
Okay.
But let me get, what are your, since you mentioned your colleague likes pizza with that Fort Ross Pinot, and I like some other things. So what are some of your favorite food pairings, both with Chardonnay and with Pinot?
Yeah. So with Pinot, I'm a huge fan of duck. I think you already mentioned duck.
Oh, I love it.
I love poultry in general. So I actually think that chicken dishes, we've done these events. Tiffany is one of our estate sommeliers. Kevin is another one. We have two great estate somms. And Tiffany and I have been doing these events called Sunday Supper. And I think we're going to start them again. It's one of our virtual events. And she put together a full 4-course menu. And the main course was a roasted chicken with roasted potatoes and these crispy spring vegetables. And that we paired it with a Bacigalupi Chardonnay and a Rocchioli Allen Pinot, and it went beautifully with both. The addition of the crispy spring vegetables, which included radishes, carrots, some root vegetables, it really accentuated the earthy qualities of the Rocchioli Allen. But the chicken was a great crossover with both. It was like a lemon roasted chicken. So that I would pair with both. But duck, I'm a fan. I like duck leg confit, say with the cherry reduction sauce.
Exactly, right. I love it too.
But I'm a huge fan of duck breast. And I love duck breast with, say, a huckleberry sauce. I've had that before. I think I've made that before in the past when I used to cook more. I can see that being absolutely stunning with either the Fort Ross or the Martella.
Yeah, I would think with the Fort Ross with that kind of savory character to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Martella, I think, can handle so many foods because it's just got so much complexity and so many, just a rainbow of flavors. I think it's work with a lot of them.
A rainbow of flavors. I love that description. As you can see behind me, I'm a huge fan of color.
Oh, there you go.
Rainbows in particular.
Nice painting. So yeah, we'll credit each other for the term. So
there you go.
Rainbow
I
flavors,
should be taking notes.
Rainbow flavors, and what was you said? Stupid delicious. Okay. Well,
stupid delicious. Yeah, I like your rainbow flavors better.
Oh, whatever. Okay, thank you. Are you welcome? The winery is open now for visitors. Is that correct?
Not quite yet. No? Okay. We haven't actually announced a date yet, as far as I know. But I believe by the end of the month, I think we're targeting reopening. With we have this beautiful outdoor terrace, and so we're set up perfectly to host guests outside. We won't be hosting them indoors, not for quite some time, I don't think.
Okay, yeah, because I heard different things, and there was all sorts of controversy about, I guess if you were a winery that served food, you could open up, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, maybe it was even as long as 2 or 3 weeks. I've lost track of time, that they allowed wineries to open if they could serve food. But now I believe tasting rooms in general are allowed to open for outdoor seating, as well as restaurants for outdoor seating. Walking downtown, I see restaurants open with their patio seating and stuff. So
This is downtown Sebastopol?
Sebastopol, Santa Rosa.
Okay.
Just the local area. Before we move on away from the wines too much, something I didn't mention is in terms of winemaking techniques with the Pinot Noir. I am a fan of whole cluster inclusion, whole cluster fermentation. And so part of what gives these wines age-worthy qualities as well is that whole cluster inclusion. Marta Ella and Fort Ross in particular have, larger 30 or 40% whole cluster. The Rochioli Allen I don't use as much. It comes from a warmer climate, and so the stems don't ripen as nicely as they do from cooler climates. And so I don't use as much whole cluster in that vineyard or in Rochioli either.
Okay.
So
are there other, I don't know, often ask this, but just I'm curious, but are there other colleagues, other local producers with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that you really admire, that you say, boy, just their Chardonnay Pinot Noir is just, what I'm after, not that you could make, but just that you really admire?
Absolutely. I've always admired the wines of Littorai. I think
Okay.
Ted Lemon is an incredible winemaker.
Right.
His wines are very Burgundian. They always have been. And he's always been a mentor, a role model. And then I love Eric Sussman's wines, Radio Coteau. I love the wines of William Selliam, totally different fruit profile. They're richer. They come from, mostly along the West Side Road, the Middle Reach area that I was talking about. But those are just 3 producers from Sonoma County that I really love. I love all the wines from the Petaluma Gap. Most producers from the Petaluma Gap, Gap's Crown Vineyard in particular.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's just south. It's kind of really on the border with Russian River, isn't it? Petaluma Gap.
Just south of the Russian River Valley. Yeah, southeast.
And you also
Beautiful.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the wines are beautiful because they have this really rustic quality to them. They have sort of a more rustic tannin backbone to them than any of the other wines that we talked about today. Okay.
And what has it been like? I have to bring this up because it's part of what's going on in 2020. But the last 3 months, I mean, you're fortunate, as they talk about with the winemakers in Italy and France. You can go out in the vineyards and continue your work. A lot of people can't. But
yes.
What is the commerce side been like? And I know that you're the winemaker, so that you're not in charge of that. But what does the last 3 months look like?
It's been tough. We've actually been doing pretty well in terms of direct-to-consumer sales. But wholesale, as you know, has been minimal. It's been very challenging because restaurants have been closed, restaurants and retail shops. But right. I think that we've got online sales outlets that are doing incredibly well. I don't want to put any names out there, but there are, some big online sites that are doing really, really well. Right. And I would say in the month of March, we did incredibly well if you look at sales direct to consumer compared to March of last year. And then the same for April. I think that we did pretty well too, but we've been doing these virtual tastings. We've got a whole offering of virtual tastings that we're offering from Gary Farrell, and that's really helping us a lot. We're not even remotely close to, what we would like to be selling because we don't have the wholesale outlet. But once things open up, we're trying. Yeah. Everywhere in the U.S., Anthony says, fine wine retailers are doing pretty well.
Okay. Well, here's a picture of the winery itself. So that beautiful patio out there. So also, I would think, too, that is with most producers in California, but yours especially, with these Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays that have a good lifespan to them. I mean, at least 3, 5, 7 years, maybe even longer in certain cases. Mm-hmm. It's not, obviously you want sales all the time, but it's not, the wines aren't going to go bad. You can sell those wines in 6 months or a year or 2 years. So.
Absolutely. We've opened wines from Gary Farrell Winery. The oldest one that I've had in the past few years is a 1988 Russian River selection from Gary Farrell, and it was still lively and beautiful and delicious. So they're meant to age.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And the Chardonnays. What's that?
I'm curious what Gary's doing these days.
I've heard that our general manager is pretty close to him, Nancy Bailey. She has a close relationship with him. And I've heard that he's restoring classic cars.
Really?
Yeah. I think that's a great hobby for a winemaker. Because as you know, winery owners, vineyard managers, winemakers tend to retire, and it gets boring after a while. So you need a great hobby, and I think that's a fantastic hobby.
I noticed that a number of them have motorcycles that they drive. So, but I can imagine that restoring old cars, there's that attention to detail that you had as a winemaker.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And a certain level of excitement and adrenaline, I think, goes along with that as well. That's part of the addiction to the winemaking, I believe, from a winemaker's perspective. I love the go of the harvest. It's a constant. Every day is a new project. In fact, every hour of the day is a new project during harvest. So it really just keeps us on our toes.
Last question. We have like 4 minutes left, and you can make this a 4-minute answer or a 2-minute answer. I'll give another question. But what have you learned in all these years? How have you progressed as a winemaker and understanding the source fruit and understanding the work in the cellar? What has been the biggest kind of eye-opening experience?
Well, for me, I've been at Gary Farrell for 8 years now. And prior to that, I made wines from one vineyard in Freestone. I worked for Joseph Phelps Freestone Vineyards for 10 years. And that was 100 acres, one vineyard, Pinot and Chardonnay. Wow. And now coming to Gary Farrell, we work with 36 different vineyards. And what's been really eye-opening for me is working with not only different growers and their farming techniques, but the different fruit qualities from those different sites, from the different climates, from the different grape growing techniques that each of the growers use. And so I've grown tremendously as a winemaker, not only by working with those different grapes, but working with those people, right? And seeing the different farming techniques. And maybe in the beginning, I may have disagreed with a certain farming technique, but who am I to disagree with somebody who's been growing grapes for longer than I've been alive?
Of course.
And so that's something that I've learned, is that you just have to have faith with these amazing, iconic growers who very much know what they're doing.
How often are you visiting these growers?
We go out, well, with the growers, we don't see each other that often, maybe a couple times a year, 2-3 times a year, depending on how often they're in the vineyard. But for example, our Healdburg vineyard, Kirk Laka, I run into him every time I head to the vineyard, basically. And he and I end up in a conversation, and sometimes it'll last 45 minutes to an hour. But I get out to the vineyards right now. Usually I'm traveling between January and June, sometimes July if we have the International Pinot Noir celebration in Oregon.
Okay.
But right now, because nobody's really traveling, I'm here, I'm hosting virtual events, and I'm spending time out in the vineyards, which is great. So this is my year of vineyard visits, which is fantastic because it's one of my favorite parts of my job. I
was going to say that's got to be a great thing. So
yeah.
And now you make how many wines total?
I've never counted the total, but I'm going to run through. So we make a Sauvignon Blanc, a rosé of Pinot Noir, an intentional rosé that's picked at low bricks and made like a Sauvignon Blanc. We make about 6 to 8 Chardonnays, about 12 to 14 Pinots, and 2 Zinfandels, and a port, like a port style wine.
Let's not forget the port. So
let's not forget that.
Based on that, how many separate individual fermentations do you have a year?
Woo. Well, we have about 35 tanks in the cellar, and we refill those about 1.5 times. So that's how many different fermentations we have.
So I imagine
that's only red wine. That's not even counting the Chardonnay. Yeah.
All right. You stay very, very busy. So
very busy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges, trying to figure out where to put everything, because as you know, Pinot and Chardonnay, the delicate varietals they ripen fairly quickly and almost always at the same time.
Right. And just last question, since the 17s are coming out and you're just amazed by how the acidity in those wines, how about 18 and 19?
Yeah, so the 18s are looking really solid as well. It was a bigger crop. I would say that the wines are a little bit less voluptuous, but elegant, polished, refined, beautiful acidity. And the 19s are almost too young to talk about. But when we sat and tasted them, I did a lot of my blend tasting here at home. And, the trial blends that we made, the wines were just really beautiful and vibrant and rich. You would never know that it was a really big crop in 2019 because the wines have this great intensity to them. It was a pretty easy, mellow, mild crop season in 2019.
Okay.
So
I can imagine that you appreciate an easy crop for, now and then, right?
Yes,
Okay.
after 17, something like 17. Yes.
Great. Okay. Our time is up, unfortunately, but it's been a great pleasure talking to you, and it's nice to meet you
Thank you.
virtually. So last time I was at the winery was when Gary had it, so it's
Right, long time ago.
overdue to come for a visit and
Yes.
talk to you and taste some wines, and I'm sure
Soon enough.
I'm sure everyone that's watching today too can't wait to get out there to Rush River Valley and try.
Yes, please do come visit us. Otherwise, take a look at our website, GaryFarrellWinery.com. Take a look at our virtual tastings and visit us virtually until you can come out and visit us physically.
Great. Theresa, thanks. And
thanks, Tom.
Best of luck, for a great harvest in 2020.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for including me in this.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.